I designed audio gear for many, many years, been doing electronics since I've been able to walk, built some power amplifiers, worked at a music store back when, the Moog stuff was just on the market, and so I did all kinds of repair work, everything from, Wurlitzer organs to Fender amplifiers, and basically by growing up with electronics, it's a second language to me. Eventually ended up owning this studio, and it evolved into what we see here now, which is, inland sea recording. I don't do just rock and roll, and I don't do just acoustic music. I do everything here. You find things have to work with all these different instruments, or you find yourself in a very small niche. It forces you to listen to what you're working on under different conditions. One minute I'm in here listening to some music, trying to figure out how to make it better. Then I might be sitting with what I learned here, going to my office, which is, Electronics Central in there, and trying to then take what I learned and create something new. Or, I come across a problem in a recording. Well, how can I solve that? How can I make that better? This a lot of times ends up having the problem of being too pure. So how do I then take what I learned in the analog world, what I learned about working with tape, and really kind of get there? People were really asking for were two things with the whole tape concept. One is to take down transients, smash them some, and the other is you get this euphoric warm mid-range that happens with tape. And there's no way you can do it with an EQ, there's no way you can, any one thing doesn't get you there. The real world, the real analog world, with all this signal chain, whether it's mic pre to the board into the tape machine, out of the tape machine back into the board, mixed summing bus back into a tape machine for your final mix, all of that is little bits of distortion from many stages. On the analog side, what generally happens as signal level gets up, you get more and more even harmonic distortion. It messes with the bottom, it softens things a little bit, but it's almost more of a feel kind of thing that takes place. If you have a circuit that has symmetrical kind of distortions, meaning it's going to affect both the bottom and top halves of your wave shape the same, then you end up having more odd kind of harmonic distortions, and usually starting out to be third harmonic. And third harmonic by itself can just make things a little brighter. If you push things too far, it can start kind of being a little bit edgier. But the thing that is mistaken a lot of times, and people think, well, you just add second harmonic and that warms things up. But then they say, well, we want to sound like what tape sounds like. Well, tape is actually third harmonic. It's a symmetrical kind of distortion that takes place. A good analog design ends up being a real balance between all of these items. Distortions in the ear are a very strange world. You can have things that can measure 30 and 40% distortion and hardly hear it as distortion at all. It might be just a change in color. You can have things that can be a 0.5% distortion. It can be, very, very ugly. Everything, in engineering school is about making things clean, making things accurate. There's nothing that exists about, making this color or making this kind of distortion to do a particular kind of thing. So you have to really do the research and you have to really listen a lot to get there. So the first thing to do is to try and develop some software that gives you this record EQ curve, the repro EQ, and then a distortion mechanism in between. The thing with Phoenix, which is a cool thing, but Phoenix, if you wanted to put it on all the tracks, you would probably have difficulty with it. And Phoenix tends to be a bit more crude because it has a lot more volume changes going on with it. The thing with heat is it has to be extremely efficient because you insert it and it's on all the tracks. In the real analog world, each channel added a certain amount of color, and it did it individually on each of the parts. Well, that's part of the thing with heat is because we want to add a little bit of color on each of the parts. And the bass is going to take on its color differently than the snare drum, differently than a guitar is going to take on its color. And by doing a little bit on each piece, it then simulates what happens in the analog world a lot better, because that's what really happens. If you try and just process after the fact, well, then you've taken something that's been pure and you processed after the fact, and you have a single stage of processing going on. Here we really have all this parallel processing going on, affecting each thing kind of in its own manner. You go, well, do I want it a little brighter? The coloring, do I want the coloring a little darker? Do I want to move more towards the side, which is in the going clockwise direction where it has the analog electronics in it? Or do I want to go to the side that's more just tape-like, which is the counterclockwise side of it? What I find is when you meld it in like that and make it an integral part of what you're doing, sometimes then you'll get your mix kind of working, and you turn everything off to see what's really happened. And you turn it back on and you get this more euphoric and the bottom richens up, but sometimes it actually gets brighter depending upon how you had the tone part of it, set. And with the tone control set kind of in the middle, it ends up being, flattish, but because it's so non-linear, you got to understand that something down at this level might be brought up or brightened or darkened compared to something at this level compared to something at this level. And that's the nature of what distortions do. They bend things around kind of in a non-linear kind of manner. We also have to remember then that this is frequency dependent, which is the big complicating factor in it, because that means what happens on a bass or a kick drum is going to be different than what's going to happen on a snare or a guitar or a vocal. And there's a certain amount of unpredictability that happens with it. You have to learn about it by listening to it and using it, and that unpredictability, the complexity of it, is what makes it really work. There will be times with guys who are going to want, well, I want more than what this does on this channel. Well, then put Phoenix on that channel, and then you got Heat as your master sound control. The thing that people need to understand, and this applies to Heat or any other tape emulation thing, is you have to allow for headroom, because you have that high frequency boost on the record side. So if you run everything up to 0, you're already smashing and overloading that high frequency boost, the input side of the process. So when you have a little less signal level going in, then everything's a lot happier. Otherwise, you will be compressing it and maybe not wanting to. When you go about it the right way, you'll find that you can make things brighter, you can make things thicker, you can get this nice euphoric low frequency energy, low mid-range that you just can't get any other way. Nobody's ever done that kind of thing. It's quite a cool thing, actually. Whether it's a piece of software or a piece of hardware, the way I look at it is, can I turn that knob or make that adjustment and not spend time and have things get better? Essentially what you need to do is be able to turn it, have it work, move on to the next thing. If you want to make high-end gear, signal processing hardware or whatever, you need to be listening to things, you need to be trying things, and you actually need to be in there doing the sessions and figuring it out and making your clients happy with whatever you're developing. I'm very happy with the way it turned out. Heat's got, 2-3 years of listening to it before it really came out. It was really a long process, but that process has resulted in it being extremely finely tuned. It's the stuff that you really put the time into and put the listening into. That's what becomes the classic kind of things.